Hi, and welcome to the Art of Film Funding. I'm your co-host, Claire Papin, along with writer-producer Carol Dean, author of the best-selling book, The Art of Film Funding, and host of this show. Carol is the president of From the Heart Productions, a nonprofit organization that has supported filmmakers with the Roy W. Dean Grant, fiscal sponsorship, education, and resources for over 30 years. Carol also teaches the Learn Producing class. Each class features an industry expert guest instructor and is designed to give the information, guidance, and support to become a successful producer. You can learn more about this class and all of From the Heart Productions offerings at FromTheHeartProductions.com.
If you're waiting for a magical producer to discover your film and make everything happen, well, today's conversation may completely change how you approach your filmmaking career.
So glad you could join us here on the Art of Film Funding podcast. I'm your co-host, Claire Papin, along with writer and producer Carol Dean, author of the best-selling book, The Art of Film Funding, and president of From the Heart Productions. For more than 30 years, From the Heart Productions has supported independent filmmakers through the Roy W. Dean Grant, fiscal sponsorship, educational programs, consultations, and resources designed to help filmmakers fund and complete their projects. Today, we're talking about one of the most important and often misunderstood roles in independent filmmaking, the producer. What does an independent producer actually do? How does a producer guide a film from its earliest development through production and post-production? We'll also discuss a common misconception about filmmakers, the belief that a magical producer will suddenly discover their project, raise all the money, assemble the perfect team, and make everything happen. The reality is that today's independent filmmakers often need to become producers of their own work. Learning to produce means understanding how to build your project, create a strategy, assemble the right collaborators, and maintain control over your film. Our guest is consulting producer Irina Chernikina, an experienced filmmaker who's worked in producing, directing, writing, and editing for more than 2 decades. Irina specializes in helping independent filmmakers understand the practical process of moving a project from development through post-production. She brings firsthand knowledge of how low and micro-budget filmmaking, project packaging, budgeting, scheduling, fundraising, preparation, and building the materials a film needs to attract supporters and move forward. Today, Irina will share her own journey to becoming a producer, explain what the producer's job really entails, and offer practical guidance for filmmakers who are ready to stop waiting to be discovered and begin taking responsibility for bringing their stories to the screen. Carol, I am really excited about this conversation. Please introduce Irina and take it away on today's interview.
Thank you, Claire. Yes, Irina, welcome to the Art of Film Funding. I'm delighted to have you with us. This is a really important subject because many filmmakers have a great idea, meaningful story, even a completed screenplay, but they do not fully understand what to do next. So today we're taking our listeners through the independent producer's journey from the first idea to the development process through financing, production, post, and completion. So let's start with your journey to producing, because I know as a producer, director, writer, and editor that you've been in the business for over 20 years. So, how did you enter the film industry and what led you to become an independent producer?
Thank you so much, Carol Dean, for having me. It's wonderful to be back. Um, yes, it's kind of unbelievable. It's been so long. And being an independent filmmaker in particular, pretty much staying away from the industry as a whole, my perspective might be a little bit different and experience might be a little bit different. Um, I started with film school. So I did get my BA in film studies. I went to Hunter College, which is fantastic film school in New York City. But unlike, let's say, maybe NYU or Columbia, we did not have a mentorship program there. So once we learned all about the art of filmmaking and the technical aspects, we were basically on our own. Nobody taught us the business side of the business, film business. And we were trying to figure out how to make films on our own. So myself and my classmates, we teamed up, we were making short films. And somehow, from the very beginning, I just naturally fell into producing. There was never even a question that you can just simply entrust that process in someone else's hands. Of course, producing on that level is very different from producing on a larger productions, right? Because you're dealing with no budget, whatever resources the school provides you, and you have to figure it out. You have to make it happen. Um, And at that point, the producing involves even things like finding locations, right? You don't have a location scouter for you. You have to do it yourself. Uh, During the shoot, you have to make sure that everyone is well fed. So you even do things like that. You might end up cooking things, buying things, right? Everything is on your shoulders. And of course, at the same time, most likely you also a director of the project because it's your creative vision, and it's very challenging in balancing the two. So from the very beginning, I think it's essential to build your team, to have that support, but also be realistic that people that you're working with also lack experience, and we kind of are all together in this boat, figuring things out. Um,
That's so true. Yes, well said. I have to laugh because, yes, everybody gets together and figures it out. And because it is such a coordinated, collaborative process, right?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, and I guess the next step, once you graduate, right now you're on your own. And uh, from that point on, I guess, it was a balance because you have your own creative projects, but also you need to make money, right? So for money, I fell into more corporate work, doing corporate videos, educational, I've done a lot of educational videos and such. And then the creative projects, mostly narrative projects, were kind of almost like a side hustle that you do on the time when the time is available. So it's unfortunate, but that happens a lot, that the actual filmmaking is treated almost like a hobby, right? Because we're all artists and we need to survive.
Right, right. So, was there a particular project or a turning point when you realized that you could not simply wait for someone else to make things happen and you needed to learn how to produce on your own?
I mean, even though, yes, I've been producing from the beginning, but there was a point where I kind of tried to walk away from film. And those couple of years were absolutely miserable. And when I made a decision to come back and now focus specifically on narratives and now more focus of a feature length films, the big shift for me was actually taking on writing more professionally. And that was a big shift because everything starts from the screenplay. If you don't have a strong script, you're not gonna make a good movie. That's just impossible. Um, and at that point, I would say now I'm within the film industry. No longer considering walking away, just kind of a persevering and learning more and more. And of course, the big part when it comes to the business side of the business, film business, the big shift was when I came across From the Heart and enrolled in the intentional filmmaking class and learned all about the actual behind the scenes, the funding in the films and so on and so forth.
Well, how
So,
nice to hear. That
mhm.
was great having you in the class. We really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've developed three major projects with your assistants, Carol and also Tom's. So I'm really grateful for that.
I think The Bum Next Door is still my favorite. I hope you continue on
Yes,
that.
I am actually developing it right now into a series, per your suggestion, because right now the money is in television, or as I call it, serialized storytelling.
Exactly. That's where it is. Well, let's start for the audience with what does a producer actually do? All right, let's fill me in on that. How do you define the role of an independent producer, and what are the producer's most important responsibilities?
I always see a producer as someone who just does whatever needs to be done to move the project forward to completion. Um, and again, depending on a level of production, right, it can be very different. As we mentioned, on a no budget, low budget productions, producer can do pretty much everything, undertake all of the elements. On the larger productions, people who either work in the studio or maybe have developed solid relationships with investors, they have money and they can hire uh, professionals for different jobs and positions on a project. Um, so that's a major difference. But regardless, I think the size of the production, one thing that producer must do is to make project valuable, because the presentation, unfortunately, is everything. A lot of filmmakers think it's the script that's the most important aspect, and I just said that yes, to make a good movie, you have to have a solid script. However, to get the funding, you have to have a proper presentation. And I call it packaging your project, which contains multiple different elements. Um, and the first element is a pitch deck. It's a visual representation of your project, and that's something that either investors or producers, or maybe you're building your team, attaching talent. That's the first element that everyone is going to see. So it's the most essential part. It's not a lookbook. A lot of filmmakers mix those two elements up. I always consider a pitch deck kind of a built-in lookbook because the design of the pitch deck has to reflect the feel and the style of your film. Um, and then, of course, additionally, you have to have a budget, and it has to be a real budget, as close as possible to a production budget. And to achieve that, you have to do a proper schedule first. And in order to do a proper schedule, you have to do a script breakdown prior to that. So that's like a step-by-step process. Script breakdown, schedule, then budget. And of course, another essential element is the business plan. The budget is going to be part of the business plan. And that is something that you have to be ready to demonstrate to your potential investors when they ask for it. So it's essential not to mix like any kind of a financial information in your pitch deck, because that's actually against Security Commission rules. But make sure to have that information in your business plan. And there is a lot more involved in the whole process. I highly recommend. I believe last month, right, we did a session for learn producing class, where I went in the more detail on each specific aspect, as well as I demonstrated examples and also provided a very useful template. So I highly recommend for listeners, especially if you're starting out, to check out Learn Producing class number 80, I believe.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's right. And we really I love producing those classes, Irina, because the way out for or into this industry for a filmmaker who has a great script or a great idea is to learn how to produce it so they can get it developed to the point they could bring on and pay for a producer. Right? That's
Uh, Absolutely. And it's very unfortunate that most producers also probably not going to be interested in a project unless it's packaged already, because it is kind of expectation of the producer to do that. But the way the situation in the industry right now, you have to become your own producer to achieve that step, basically. And then once that step is achieved, it should be easier to attract a producer maybe with more experience who now can potentially maybe bring some money on board.
exactly. Well, let's talk about the difference between the producer and the director, because producers are responsible for the logistics and directors lead the creativity. So many independent filmmakers are both directors and producers. And what is the difference between thinking like a director and thinking like a producer? And how can filmmakers balance their creative vision with the practical needs of the production?
Yes, I can speak from my experience because it's always been challenging for me to do both, even though I've always been doing both. And because I think my mindset is a producer first and director second. I always feel when I'm on the set, I neglect my actors, for example, because my focus is so much just making sure that all the elements fall into place, everything runs smoothly. So I always feel like I'm not giving enough time to my talent. So that's my challenge for as long as I remember. And I'm looking forward to a day when I can completely let go of the producing, at least when I'm on a set, not during
Yes,
the development, not during pre-production, but when I'm physically, filming. It would be a gift, to have a producer who can take over during that stage of the production.
yes,
And for me, just to focus on the creative aspects, because it's so important. But from my experience as a producer working with other directors and being on other people's sets in generally, I think the biggest challenge when there is a clash, and kind of a struggle and pull right between the producer and the director, because the producer always concerned about the money, and the director is always focused on how to achieve, the creative vision. And I think it's always helpful. That's where I always believe that filmmakers should understand about producing as much as possible, as well as just generally what's going on a set, right? What are the different positions, jobs on a set, what your crew people are responsible for. The better you understand all those different elements, when the time comes, and it will always happen, no set is 100% smooth. There are always challenges, unexpected changes that you have to adapt. But the better you understand what the process is, instead of like headbutting each other,
yes,
you can actually listen to each other and work it out, because creating a conflict never helps the production. It actually wastes time, right? It affects energy on the set, which is essential. We are a team, we have to work together. So it's essential to understand that sometimes, yes, maybe you had a plan for, I don't know, this beautiful sunset shot, and you lost time basically, right? It's no longer available. See if there is a potentially, maybe switching things around and film something else, and then maybe substitute the sunrise for sunset and get that golden hour shot in the morning instead. Just be open and flexible instead of just getting upset and just kind of sulking and like, oh, we missed the opportunity, right?
Right.
Also important to listen to your crew. Often I hear on a new and experienced sets, people ignore sound person. It generally just kind of ignore the sound altogether. And the sound person might say, okay, there's a like plane flew by. And I understand now with the new technologies, it's a lot easier to clean up sound in the post-production. But the mentality that I've been trained with and highly recommend to kind of use that mentality is that don't rely on post-production to fix things. Do everything as much as possible properly during production. It's like we fix it in the post. A lot of times that's how films never get completed because
Yes.
they fall apart on that final stage. Um, so yeah, listen to your crew. If crew says there is a problem, normally professionals will not bother you unless there is a reason to bring attention to something. Um, and I guess, flexibility, your artistic vision is important, but unfortunately, I have to say it's more important to finish a movie on time because the way the industry is right now, unless you're funding it yourself, that's different, right? But if you are dealing with the investors and money and you don't finish the movie on time, it will be very hard for you to make next movie. That's the
Yeah.
reality of it.
Yes, that's right. But what I notice is that the problems between the producer and the director often happen over money because the producer's job is to create and stay within the budget. The directors is to give the film the most visuals and the biggest display of energy and resources as possible. So those two things, and they don't care if they stay in budget or not because they didn't have to raise the money normally. They're there for the art. And that's why producers have a rough time and are really considered the tightwads of the industry because they're holding the purse strings, right?
Yes, and I think usually why such conflicts occur is again, the director lacks producing experience and
Yes.
understanding of the whole process, and the producer lacks the creative experience. Because it's also helpful if your producer is also a creative person, creative producer, not just a banker, not just a manager, right?
Yes.
Who's there running the set and people to the ground. That's also not the way to do it, because people are exhausted as is. Usually, when you're on a set, there is like barely any sleep. After first week, that's when emotions flare up. And usually after a second week, if that's how you run the set and you run people into the ground, people actually start getting sick, physically sick, and they start disappearing. That's unfortunately a very common thing that happens, and not just with the independent world, but also big productions. The difference is with the big productions, they run a little bit more by the book, money involved, right? And people kind of more used of those conditions. And also, obviously, they have very easily they can replace you, right? If you get sick, they just replace someone else. In the small productions, sometimes that's not the case. If you lose someone, it's very hard to find a replacement for that person right away. So that's where I think for producers, it's also important to be a creative producer. Also understand, what's the process of creating a screenplay involved. Because a lot of, producers, they just purchase a screenplay, right? They just produce it. They don't create it, they don't write it. So there is no emotional connection to the
Yes.
process. If you are a writer director, you are heavily emotionally attached to your work, and that's why, that vision in your head that been brewing there for years, and now you finally on a set, you want to make sure that it's close as possible to that vision. So yes, once again, I think it's just overall helpful, to understand the entire process of the production.
Yes.
So this way, when you're on a set, it goes as smoothly as possible.
Exactly. This is so important. All right, well, let's start with the difference here where someone begins to produce a film. Let's say an independent filmmaker brings you a screenplay or a documentary concept. What's the first question you ask, and how do you determine whether the project is ready to move into development?
I mean, my background mostly with narratives, um, and educational can be kind of a considered documentary, but documentaries are very different in the way they're planned because there is no real screenplay and there is an outline, and the screenplay is created actually during the post-production process. With the narratives, it's a little bit more straightforward. Yes, when I consult on the screenplays, the first question is it the first draft? Because a lot of new writers, for them, just completing the screenplay is such an incredible achievement, and that they just think that they're done, basically, that this is it. I call it the me draft, and I recommend actually not to show anyone me draft. The first draft is just for your own eyes. And then it's a good idea to have a little bit of time and not to look at the script, kind of separate yourself, and then do several rewrites. And again, I learned that from fantastic teacher Jacob Kruger. Highly recommend his free sessions on Thursdays. WriteYourScreenplay.com, that's his website. And the way he changed my perspective is like you have to put yourself in the shoes of your characters. So he recommends to do multiple rewrites from perspective of each character, basically. So you have to be patient, no rush, and do that work. And then, I would ask, okay, if it's not a first draft, have you done coverage? Have you hired professionals who read your script and give you notes? That's a coverage. I personally don't do that. I do more of a consultation. I go through the script and I make notes on structure and maybe character development and formatting, which is also essential if you're going to be presenting your screenplay for someone else to produce. If you're basically making a film on your own, usually I don't focus on the formatting as much because it's for your own eyes. I give you the suggestions, and it's up to a filmmaker to take those suggestions or not. However, if you are planning to shop around, right? If you're planning to actually maybe sell the screenplay, because some people are just writers, right? Some people, they're not looking to direct and produce. Then formatting is absolutely essential, especially now because we're using tools for like script breakdown, scheduling, budgeting, and now there is a lot of AI assists are involved. And if your script is not properly formatted, it's going to be dismissed. It's just literally on the page one, a lot of times you can see, like, is it somebody who done the work, or is somebody new just starting out and still needs more education and such?
Well, with all the programs like Largo, where they read your script and give you feedback, and since you work with that, then you would know immediately when they does Largo spit it back out and say you have to add direction or anything?
Yes, yes. Largo AI is a fantastic tool also for business plan development.
Yes.
But screenplay analysis, like I know first time I saw the report, I was surprised because you don't expect it, but all it does, it analyzes your wording, right, your sentences, and gives you just a breakdown and also visual representation of your screenplay, which is very helpful. So you can actually see if there is a maybe emotional deep in the middle of the film. Usually it's act two. I've seen it quite often. So that always like helps you to focus on certain parts of the script that you need to rewrite. Because as a writer, you get close to your own material, and it is difficult to separate yourself. So yes, Largo AI is definitely a fantastic tool. Pretty much for the cost of one coverage, you get so much more because it also includes financial projections. which is, it's possible to find box office on your own online, but you cannot find projections for streamers. And Largo AI includes that in the report. So definitely highly recommend. Yeah, if you're working on packaging, look into that, explore it. And by the way, if you go directly to Largo AI, it's not for independent filmmakers. They charge like $10,000 a year in membership just to be able to access the system. So the fact that from the heart made it available to independent filmmakers and affordable, it's incredible value.
Oh, thank you. I think it is. I think it's brilliant. And they keep expanding its capabilities. They're really putting more and more money back into developing that program, which is appreciated. Okay, so now we're at building a professional film package. Before filmmakers approach donors, investors, even cast members, what material should be included in a strong film package? Go over the elements with us. Please start with the pitch deck then.
Mhm. Yes, I briefly went over that earlier. And again, for more details, it's best to go and watch the Learn Producing class session. But once again, I can go over the elements. The pitch deck, which contains your statement, why you're doing the project, right? Because you are connecting on emotional level with whoever reading your project. Then, of course, logline, synopsis. You want to definitely talk about your characters. So you want to give a character description. If you already maybe cast some actors in those roles, absolutely include it, especially if somebody who's, maybe not A-list star, but have a, solid film career, right? A lot of projects under the belt. So this way, when potential investors can Google them and see them on IMDb, they can see that it's a solid actor for the role. And of course, if you already have a team, make sure to include your team on the pitch deck. And also, it's okay to do comparables. So maybe like 4 projects you can mention that are similar to yours in the genre and also budgetary level. That's also important. And of course, make sure there is contact information so people know how to find you. And then, of course, I talked about budget, schedule, and script breakdown. So that's very important for a proper budget. And you're gonna take the budget top sheet and include not the entire budget, just the top sheet. You're gonna include it on your business plan, as well as Largo AI financial projections. I personally using Tom Malloy's business plan. It's the easiest to understand. It's straightforward. It's visually simple, but impressive. And the only thing I did, I added more detailed waterfall to his plan because he has like a brief one. And I use actual projections from Largo AI. So it's not just like random numbers, just to give an example to your investor. It's actually you have a system that analyzes your screenplay and gives potential how much money actually your movie can make, which is essential, especially right now with the way industry is.
Exactly.
Mhm.
What's the return on investment? Well, let's talk about the budget and the schedule because underestimating time that it takes to film a scene is really hurting your production. You say Hollywood shoots 3 minutes and 3 pages a day on average. So on my most efficient day, 32 pages were filmed in one 10-hour day with a 4-person crew. Wow. So, how did the budget and production schedule influence one another's, and what mistakes do inexperienced filmmakers commonly make when estimating how much money and time their film will require?
Yes, it all depends, like also who your crew is, right? If you work with people like that example that I have given, when we filmed 32 pages in one short day, 10-hour day is a short day for filmmaking. We worked together on multiple productions prior to that. Yes, we had different PAs, but the core crew, the camera, sound, um, lights, right? The core crew, we really worked well together and we knew each other. And that was the reason why we were able to move so smoothly. Also, all of the actors were professional. It was filmed in New York, so you have a lot of wonderful actors there. And also the writer, director, producer in this case, she was very flexible. She allowed for some freedom of movement, some improv. So if let's say a line wasn't exactly as it was written, but it worked, she would be fine, and that's where I was talking about flexibility, right? And that creative vision. We are collaborators. So it's important to be open to that. Of course, there are filmmakers like, Woody Allen who does like 100 takes, right? But he has resources to do that. If you're starting out, I highly recommend not to do that. Focus,
Right.
do some rehearsing ahead of time, but once you roll the camera, do at least minimum 3 takes. That's important because you also want to make sure if there's a technical issue, you do have another take to back you up. But that's the big difference, with the effect on your schedule and the budget. Because if you have a big production, right, you have a big crew, it even if they're professional crew, it just automatically takes more time to set up, right? Between every time you move and you have to break down the set and set it up again, it takes time. Even on like small experience shoots, I would say you have to give at least an hour um, for the setting up, at least two, I would say, and to break down usually an hour. If the crew is really experienced, and again, it's a small crew, maybe you can go faster than that, but normally you have to consider that. And of course, number of locations, right? It's important also to consider. If you do a single location shoot, obviously you can do it a lot tighter and faster versus a production where you have like maybe 10 locations, right? Something like that. Also, number of characters. If you have maybe two leads and two supporting roles, it's a single location shoot. Obviously, you can do it much faster. You can do more than 3 pages per day. Um, of course, you need to consider maybe some scenes are very emotional scenes. So when you go through your script breakdown and you create a schedule, you have to consider that. Maybe there will be a little bit more time required, to rehearse a little bit more, to run through the scene, maybe to do a few more, takes, etc., etc. If there are action sequences, that's definitely going to take more time to set up and film. So all of those elements are important to consider in the scheduling
Mhm.
phase, and they will affect your budget. And again, just having the number of people on your crew and cast will affect your budget big time because that's a number one rule of any production, even no budget productions, you have to feed your crew. Like never ever, don't feed your crew. And when I say feed your crew, pizza might do it for a day. No, you have to feed a good quality food so that the energy is up, so there is no energy dips. And that alone will your budget will be affected greatly just by the number of people working on your production. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, because we're talking about being your own producer, some people say you should learn the entire filmmaking process, like get on the set as a PA and work as many different departments as possible on an indie film to get ready to multitask. So when you say that filmmakers need to become their own producers, what do you mean in practical terms? What would you recommend?
hmm Well, I mean, generally, again, to understand the process, I think the easiest way to understand the process, and it doesn't matter, I'm not saying that you have to be a young kid, who just graduated, film school. It applies to anyone. Maybe some people been dreaming, being on the set their whole life, and they finally retired, and then they have time to focus on what they really want to do. First step is just volunteer. Just help other independent filmmakers and start with the short films because it's easier, right? Maybe something that takes maybe like 3 days to film or maybe over a weekend. It's very, very common for filmmakers to do that and just observe And that's, as a PA, your opportunity to do pretty much anything on a set and to understand, again, what the process is, and then see where it leads you. A lot of times people try different things and they realize, okay, I'm a writer, but I really like set design as well. And they might end up going into that direction maybe. Or some people realize, oh, I really want to make money, but as a writer, it's really, really challenging. And they end up on a set and they see that one person that's always needed is a good sound person. And
Oh,
you might end
yes.
up investing a little bit of money in a boom mic and mixer recorder and end up and also it's a great workout. You're definitely going to build your upper body strength. So you never know. But that's essential. Again, the more you understand who, does what, also you will see, how long it takes to set up the lights, right? So that's where you're gonna realize how much more involved in the process, and there are other people involved in the process. It's not just about you as an artist. That's also very important. You know, we artistic people, we have a tendency to be very focused just on what we do. And it's essential to realize that the success of the film depends on your team. And that's how you find your team. That's how you build your team by physically getting out of there, out of, in the world and being part of the productions. That's how you might end up, finding your actors, working on someone else's set, connecting with another producer, and so forth.
Yes, you've got to jump in to play the game. You do. You need to be on that set. Well, let's talk about financing and fundraising responsibilities because usually investors don't want to be the first money in. And it's expected to have a fully packaged project within 20% of the money, or with maybe 10 to 20% of the money already raised. So what role should the producer play in financing and fundraising? And is it reasonable for a filmmaker to expect a producer to arrive with all the money? Or should the filmmaker also participate in finding donors, investors, grants, etc.?
Well, in the beginning, you really kind of have to do as much as possible on your own. And absolutely, like the grants, it's free money, it's out there. All independent filmmakers should take advantage of that. The grant advance system that From the Heart has access to is absolutely amazing resource. Crowdfunding, again, free money, money that you do not have to return. So learn as much as possible about crowdfunding because it's also a team effort. Don't try to do it on your own. I mean, I literally started a film funding group with that idea to help filmmakers because we see every time somebody does it on their own, usually they don't reach the desirable goal. So team building is kind of like at the base of everything. Because for touching experiencing and producers and investors, unfortunately, they will see how far you got on your own. Um, if you haven't done the work, um, there are so many filmmakers that did do the work, right? They walked the
Yes.
walk. So of course, more experienced producers, production houses, and investors, those are the people that they're gonna be drawn to, right? So it's just natural. Um, that's how things are, unfortunately. But what I've seen, and one of the filmmakers I'm currently working with, what happened to him, he did the work, he filmed the proof of concept, and there was a plan to do a feature. But because he's such a precise artist and also, has such a great business mind, he attracted the right people. And now there are multiple producers and film funds, and they actually ask him to create a series out of it, so to make it bigger.
Oh,
And now there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and it's really fascinating to watch that process because that's obviously in the television or streaming. It's on the next level. So
yes.
something that started as a small independent film, a genre film, now is becoming this potentially a series But again, if he hasn't done that work first, right? If he hasn't done the packaging,
Yes.
you know, filming and completing proof of concept, that wouldn't happen. And actually, he also got very close getting that initial 10% by using tax insensitive in his state and selling it to the bank, which is one of the ways, you know, we filmmakers can get that initial 10 to 20%. So he got very close. He actually had a bank that was interested, and that's what happened. When producers saw that, they're like, okay, he's the real deal. We can actually work with him. He listens. He also did do rewrites, obviously, you know, when it went into the series instead of the feature film. And
Yeah.
that's also important, you know, like if somebody tells you, okay, now you're working on this level, you know, you might be working with the big actors. Now you have to listen to the feedback from them and you have to be okay to integrate the feedback. But again, you don't have to sacrifice your vision, but you have to be okay to make those adjustments and changes to your script.
Flexibility is key. You're right.
Yes.
But let me ask you to go back and tell us about your film group. When does it meet? How do you join? Everything. Tell us.
Yes, Film Funding Group. We are on Facebook. And in fact, we have a really important event literally tomorrow. Um, and It's going to be with one of our potential investor groups. Currently, there is a two financial groups that we are connected with. One is a matching fund, and the other one is a finishing fund. And This particular presentation is going to be done by the matching fund. And The subject matter is going to be Hollywood 3.0, and discussion is going to be what studios and big producers are looking for, you know, how they actually choose the projects that they're gonna make happen. Yes, so it's gonna take place tomorrow, uh, 4 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Um, and You can find all the information in the group in the featured section. Highly recommend to check it out. And we're also recording our sessions, so that recording will be available on our page as well afterwards, in case if you do miss that session.
And what is the address on Facebook?
Oh, just look for the film funding group, and when you see like a behind the scenes image of the camera with the light, that's the group. That's my
Oh,
group. Mhm.
okay, good, great. All right, well, now let's get into post-production, the ultimate indie producer's nightmare, because usually there's so much more money that they have to spend than they had intended. So a producer's work does not end when principal photography is completed. So take us through the responsibilities during editing, sound, music, etc., because that's where it really all comes together is in post. And what does a producer do?
I mean, again, it differs, right, with the small productions versus bigger productions. On the bigger productions, you just simply hire the best person for the job. It's, you know, you have the money, so you hire your editor, your sound mixing, your color correction, you know, etc., etc. As an indie producer, yes, if you're not run out of the money during production, you're doing something wrong. Usually, money runs out in the production stage, and then filmmakers do another fundraiser to raise money for post-production. But what I see, if you are technical and you're curious, I highly recommend to learn post-production process. You can do it nowadays completely for free, you know, with the DaVinci. They have a free version of professional editing software. There is a plenty, probably thousands of educational free videos on the YouTube you can find. And so at least you understand again what the process is involved. A lot of times people underestimate how much time it takes to do post-production, so which also affects your budget and also expectations when you're working with the editor. I see it all the time. that a lot of creative people, they just think it's like magically gonna come together. But in reality, on a feature film, it's recommended to dedicate 3 months for post-production. And when I say 3 months, that's just editing alone, not including color correction, sound work, and so forth. I've seen people do it in a month, but usually those are the super efficient filmmakers who do it all. And that's what I used to do. Now I'm primarily focused on producing, but that's what I used to do. Write, direct, produce, and then edit myself. Yes, because if you experience all-in-one specialist, a filmmaker, you know exactly how to film something efficiently, so you're not wasting takes. So you in the post-production, then you don't have to go through 100 takes, right? You have a lot less footage to review, and all of that affects the timing. You know, how long it's going to take you to complete the film. So yes, people who are amazing talents who also do their own color correction, special effects. I mean, I've never done that. I purely editing is my thing. I may do some simple sound cleanup, but I'm not a sound mixer. But people who do it all, I actually have seen filmmakers like finish production, let's say in 10 days, and then literally like a month later they have a finished cut, and then they obviously still do additional cleanup and such. So it is possible. It is possible to develop those skills, to learn the craft or multiple crafts, I guess.
Yes,
But again, if it's not something that's plausible, then the best thing is to focus on getting the money, right? It's either one way or the other. Either you figure out how to do it all on your own, or get really well, like versed in developing relationships and getting the money. So I would say those are like the two ways potentially to get through the whole process and finishing the post-production. Post-production is such a big challenge for filmmakers that again, one of the funds right now that we have a connection with, specifically finishing fund, because that's usually what things get stuck. Um,
exactly. Finishing funds is what everybody needs.
mhm.
Well, here, I just want you to take a minute and tell us what your services are. What do you do for filmmakers?
Primarily consulting services. I consult on screenplay and then do packaging, assist, with the pitch deck. I'm not designer myself, but I have a wonderful designer that I'm working with. But I guide you through the process of what goes into the pitch deck, which is also very important.
Yes.
And then, of course, script breakdown, scheduling, budgeting. So this way, the budget that you have is as close as possible to the production budget. I don't do $100 million productions. I feel comfortable, I would say 3 million and under. Especially, I love the sweet spot a million and under, because right now it's so challenging to recoup the money. I highly recommend, if there is a way to do a film under a million, do it. It will be just less stress on you as well, because you have to pay that money back, right? It's not a gift, unless, of course, you crowdfund really well and you can raise the money as well. Or using fiscal sponsorship, that's another way to get free money, because your supporters just get tax deductions in return. So if you can do that and raise a million that way, fantastic. But in majority of cases, you involved with investors when you're at that level or higher. Um, so yes, that's kind of my comfort zone.
Mhm.
And of course, after the budget is completed, I prepare the business plan. I do incorporate a larger AI report in my packaging services. And that's basically it. And I have to say, if filmmakers are listening and they really proactive, they take action. Um, I'm known, to speak up and connect people to other people. But I'm definitely not doing this automatically and for everyone. But people who work hard, like that filmmaker I mentioned,
Yes.
he connected to the producer and now all these potential investors through participating in my Your Production Team initiative. So his project got elevated just by working together, basically.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's talk about how filmmakers, what can they do today to move a project forward? Because if they're still waiting for someone else to move it forward, that's that's a bad way to live, because you really need to move your film forward, take responsibility. So tell us give us 3 actions that filmmakers can do.
I mean, to summarize in a short way, I would say learn the craft, do the craft, and then do it again. Again and again and again. The more you actually do it, the better and more comfortable you will be in your own skin. And at some point, then you will be comfortable, pitching, approaching people with money, because again, most investors are not film people. They don't know anything about film. They are in other industries. They're successful business people. So then, and of course, you're gonna make better movies, right? Start with the short films, obviously, highly don't recommend jumping into feature right away, unless again you have the money of your own. Maybe your family is wealthy and you can hire the right people for the job. Of course, then there is nothing wrong to do a feature right away, and some people have done so successfully. But for majority of independent filmmakers, um, that's essential. Again, learn, do, and do it again. Yeah.
Thank you, Irina. Thank you for joining us on the Art of Film Funding and for giving our listeners such an honest and practical understanding of what an independent producer really does. So I especially appreciate your message that filmmakers cannot spend their lives waiting for a magical producer to discover them and make everything happen. They must learn the business of their films. This is what people miss. It is the business of film. So, to our listeners, remember that becoming the producer of your film does not mean that you must do everything alone. It means that you become the leader of your project. You understand what your film needs, you find the right people to help you, and continue moving forward one achievable step at a time. So, Irina, we really thank you very much for sharing all this knowledge. And to everyone listening, I want to remind you about the new audiobook, You Are the Magic. It was created to help you recognize your own creative powers, connect with your vision, and understand that the future of your film begins with what you believe is possible. So, in closing, the message today is you do not have to wait for someone else to give you permission to tell your story. You are the magic. Your story matters, and Hollywood needs you. So, thank you for joining us on the Art of Film Funding. And thank you, Irina, and thank you, Claire, for the information today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Carolyn.
Great.
Now, in its second edition, Carol Dean's popular book, The Art of Film Funding, has 12 new chapters to cover all areas of film financing and how to avoid expensive pitfalls. Learn how to start with an idea and end with a trailer, how to make an ask for money, create your story structure and your trailer, legal advice, fair use, successful crowdfunding, how to ask for music rights, and what insurance you can't shoot without. Available on Amazon under Carol Dean and at FromTheHeartProductions.com. I want to remind our listeners that David Raiklin is a brilliant and talented award-winning musician who scores films and can compose music for a trio or for a full orchestra. David is a very good friend to the independent filmmaker and comes highly recommended by From the Heart Productions. If you need music to help tell your story, please contact him at davidraiklin.com. That's David, RAIKLEN.com. And Carol and I want to thank you for tuning in to The Art of Film Funding. Please visit our website at FromTheHeartProductions.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Good luck with your films, everyone.